We are back. I am excited to have this deck again because I did play it a couple years ago at a Legacy 1K and managed to steal first place. And I'm going to be talking about it all over again because I did play it again relatively recently, maybe a month ago, and it was awesome. So if you're new, make sure you hit the subscribe button and check out the link in the description for a playlist of my featured recording of that tournament. Quality's not the best, but I was still experimenting and I still am. So if you like this kind of deck, make sure you stay tuned because I'm going to be breaking it down in detail for those who have not seen it yet. Now, Legacy is my personal favorite format. It is the just pure Magic format, all sets available, just one ban list. You don't have to worry about set restrictions. And one of the things that always made Legacy prohibitively expensive is the reserve list, a special set of cards that never get reprints because of reasons. And they have featured lands, which are a very core part of this game. So if your lands are too expensive, it's hard to play the game. Well, we are playing a deck that tends to not want non-basic lands. And basic lands, they're pretty cheap. When Modern Horizons first came out, Prismatic Vista, which I think was Modern Horizons 2, was a card that went right on my radar. Because I thought to myself, I'm like, oh, I can just play 8 copies of Flooded Strand. They both get island or plains. Now, Prismatic Vista is not able to find dual lands. But remember, we're not trying to play dual lands. And we just have a bunch of basic lands. 6 islands, 3 plains. And now with 8 copies of a fetch land that can find either of them, you can pretty easily find the colors you need, and it's not a very white-heavy deck. Well, what kind of deck is this? This is a blue-white control deck. We are trying to run our opponent out of spells. We are trying to control the game. They're saying, here's the thing that I want to play that will eventually win the game or win the game on the spot, and we just say, nope, kill it, counter it, whatever it is. But this blue-white control deck is built around the Miracle mechanic. So it is given the name Blue-White Miracles or Back to Basic Miracles, right? A lot of miracle cards. The primary miracle card is this one. It is a 6-mana sorcery that you put all creatures on the battlefield on the bottom of their owner's library. Gets around any kind of indestructible weirdness, dies, triggers, all that, gets around all that. So it takes them off the battlefield. Yes, it puts it back in your opponent's library, but that tends to not really matter. 6 mana is not very efficient. However, if you see where it says miracle, for 1 white mana, you can board wipe. That is insane. But to meet the miracle requirement, you do have to specifically draw it for the first time on that turn. That has to be the first card you draw, and then you reveal it and then pay the miracle cost. It does ignore timing restrictions because otherwise miracle wouldn't work. So you have to cast it on your draw step or whenever that would be. So even though this is a sorcery, you can cast it on your draw step when you draw it for your first time. Or if you manage to draw a card on your opponent's turn, and it's that first one, you still can cast it on their turn, even though it's a sorcery. So that's a cool little thing. You can basically make it instant speed. But what makes this really playable in Legacy is a very strong Legacy staple, Brainstorm. What makes this card so good is it effectively ends up being an Ancestral Recall. 1 blue, draw 3 cards. Obviously, that's not literally what it is, but with all these fetch lands, Prismatic Vista and everything like that, when you draw 3 cards and you put 2 bad cards on top and then just shuffle them away after you use your land, that's pretty awesome. That's like basically drawing 3 new cards. But it turns out we're also going to be utilizing the put cards on top of your library even more with miracle cards. So we set things up like that. We sculpt our hand with spells like Brainstorm and Ponder, another staple. And even cards like Portent, which isn't an amazing card. I wouldn't blame you if you didn't want to play this, but I think of it as Ponders 5 and 6. And it's literally Ponder, except for when you draw the card, it's on the next upkeep. Well, if you set up a miracle, now you get a free draw without spending more mana to draw a card, and then you get to use your miracle. Another cool thing is you can dome your opponent. You're like, yeah, let me look at your top 3 and decide if you want to shuffle. And I've never actually done that, but you can do that. So yeah, it is built around Back to Basics, and I'm choosing not to play dual lands, not because I have budgetary restrictions or anything like that, because this is a proxy-friendly tournament. Legacy, you kind of have to do that to get people to show up. But I'm doing it for strategic reasons. Every dual land I play is more susceptible to Wasteland, which is a very important card, destroys your non-basic lands. And so Wasteland ends up being bad against me. And it's just another non-bow piece in my deck with Back to Basics. Now, as you can see on your screen here, I do have 2 non-basic lands that aren't fetch lands. I have Gaia Reach Sanitarium and Mystic Sanctuary. I'd like to think Mystic Sanctuary does speak for itself. But just in case it doesn't, well, you can just set up a miracle. Let's say I Terminus, and Terminus is in my graveyard, and it's kind of late in the game. I got a couple islands and plains in play, and then I have a fetch land that is not Prismatic Vista. I have a Tarn or a Strand. I can break it, put Mystic Sanctuary on the battlefield. If it's untapped, which it usually will be, I can choose an instant sorcery, put it back on top of my library. I like a Terminus, untap to my turn, and then Terminus the board away. I've done that quite a few times, but I've even returned counter spells to the top of my deck and cast a Brainstorm or whatever it is. So the deck is to stop their threat. So our main way to do that is when they play a bunch of things, we play Terminus to get rid of it. And we also have Swords to Plowshares, which is probably the single most efficient targeted creature removal in the game. You just 1 mana, your thing is exiled, and then you get to gain life. So there's no intrinsic card advantage to your opponent. Their life total just goes up a little bit, which our deck does not care about. Because our deck is going to win the game by making a lot of 4/4 Angels with this Miracle card. Or it's going to ultimate Jace the Mind Sculptor, still one of my personal favorites. Jace the Mind Sculptor does not care about your life total, so I like that. Jace is also just good in a number of ways. He impacts the board, he controls their draw step, and he has a 0 loyalty brainstorm every turn. You get to go up on cards, you get set up, just amazing. It's like the card advantage engine of the deck. You do have to play inefficient, and by inefficient I mean in terms of cards, and mana cost counterspells in Legacy. You have to do it, or you die on turn 1. So you need 0 mana counterspells where you do 2 for 1 yourself, and that's just how it works. So we've got 4 Force of Will, and a pretty solidly known staple of Legacy. And a change I made is I did have 2 Force Negation in the original list, but I had 2 Spell Pierce because I wanted to, have efficiency on turn 1. But that card was probably the most underperforming card if I had to pick one. So I cut those 2. I went up to a 3rd negation. So far I've been liking that. I am still on to Snapcaster Mage because I like Snapcaster Mage. 2 seems to be the right number. And 1 Deprive, which was in the counterspell slot in the old versions, but I switched that to a Deprive because of Mystic Sanctuary. I can put Mystic Sanctuary back to my hand, put Mystic Sanctuary on the battlefield as my land drop, put Deprive back on top of my library, brainstorm with Jace, put it back in my hand, and just have Deprive every turn. So just like I like access to 1. That was also something that happened a lot when Mystic Sanctuary was legal in Modern. People were actually playing the card Deprived in their constructed Modern decks, but more so along with Cryptic Command, which 4 mana spell like that just isn't playable in Legacy. So other than that, you're probably wondering about Gaia Reach Sanitarium. So Gaia Reach Sanitarium is a fine Magic card. I like it. I would say you definitely don't have to. This could just be another fetch land, could be another island. That's totally fine. Could even be a dual land if you want to splash red or just have 1 Tundra in your deck. I like Gaia Reach Sanitarium for a couple of reasons. One, it helps you trigger miracles on your opponent's turn, right? You can do that. Another thing is Narset, which is a really strong Magic card, has a cool little combo with Gaia Reach Sanitarium. So, and this happened at my tournament. I was playing against, I think it was Grixis. Yeah, it was like a Grixis like Delver deck, but I don't know if he had Delver. No, I think he might have had it. But anyway. And we were just trading blows. And he was like, kill your thing, kind of thing, back and forth, hit me a few times. Terminus, and then the dust settles. And we're both kind of top decking, but I get a Narset in play, so I might be up 1 or 2 cards. And he's run out of cards, and so I have my Gaia Reach in play. And when he would draw his card, he had like 1 card in his hand, so he'd draw, you have 2. On his end step, I'd be like, okay, activate Gaia Reach. On his end step, he's already drawn his 1 card for the turn, right? That's what Narset says. So when Gaia Reach says each player draws and discards, he fails to do the draw check because of Narset, and so he just has to discard and goes down a card where I loot. And then when he has no cards in hand, I just do this on his draw step, every draw step, and he has no cards. And so that was pretty awesome. He's like, oh, I just can't win. I'm like, yeah. So that's a cool little lock I like in the deck. And if you have Teferi Time Reveler on the battlefield, they can only cast spells at sorcery speed. That's just basically a hard lock. Their only real way out of that is to have some kind of ability like a channel or something, which doesn't see a lot of Legacy play. The biggest new card, though, besides the 3rd Force Negation, is Triumph of St. Catherine. This card came out as a Warhammer 40k. That did not exist at the time I recorded the 1k tournament a couple years ago. So this is a new Miracle card I wanted to try out. And it solved a few problems that I liked with the deck. So I do endorse this card after playing with it. One, the lifelink. Gaining life was a problem, and there's a lot of times where these fair matchups would just grind down and my life total would get too low. I fetch so much, and then I just can't quite last long enough to get to the late game, which is what I want to do. And being able to block or get 1 hit in with this thing is quite amazing. Gives me like an entire turn sometimes. But also it allows me to put a clock into play, which isn't really something this deck could do, because it would just have to dig and find and treat the angels. So it puts a clock in play that can pressure someone who's stumbling, which happened. I played against the blue-black scam reanimator deck that was really popular, and my opponent had a slow start, and I hit a Triumph really early, and I just bam, 5, bam, 5. It kind of reminded me like Gurmag Angler in the old Grixis control deck that Reed Duke used to play. You just put a Gurmag Angler in play for 1 mana or 2 mana, and that's a fast clock, and you're still a control deck. So combining those together, that I can miracle it out. It has lifelink and it's just a 5/5. It's pretty awesome. And it has some resiliency, although this resiliency tends to not matter much in Legacy, because there's not a whole lot of, I don't know a whole lot of things that would kill a 5/5 white creature that people actually play, but I mean, it exists. So if I Terminus my own guy, he doesn't go into the top 7, but anyway. So this card, very, very good. I've liked it so far. The sideboard needs a lot more changing. That's the least thing I updated. The only thing I really added was Wrath of the Skies, because I just like this card. This card's amazing. We're a very Planeswalker heavy deck, very not creature heavy deck, and the only thing that this would kill, I wouldn't want it to kill and play, is probably Back to Basics. So I just play it right, and this card's just great. Every other card you see in here, I'm pretty sure every other card I had in my 1K version. So I don't know if Vendilion Clique is still a playable card. I liked it in a lot of matchups at the time. It's good with Narset, but you know, in 2024, we might just be past Vendilion Clique. I mean, it's still like a fine card on its own, but I just don't know if it's good enough in Legacy. I still have a huge endorsement of Elspeth Sun's Nemesis. This is like the card you bring in the fair matchup. So if they're not some degenerate combo deck or whatever, some unfair engine, if it's just like, you know, Delver or Net the Control deck or a mid-range deck, some Jund style, anything like that, Elspeth is amazing, and it's hard to deal with the repeat value. And then Court of Grace has also been amazing. This might, between those two cards in the fair matchups, Court of Grace and Elspeth, I almost always draw one of them, if not both, and I've never lost when I've had these in play. So not a whole lot to say here. I've utilized pretty much every sideboard card. Maybe with the, I don't think I brought Vendilion Clique in, because I played the Reanimator, I played a Delver deck, I played Dredge. So Dredge, you know, I have plenty of hate against Dredge between Containment Priest and Surgical Extraction and Flusterstorm, and so plenty of hate there. I played against Merfolk, and I think a different week. And I think that was one I actually ended up losing to, but you know, I made some mistakes. I should have mulliganed once. But I think cards like Wrath of the Skies and Triumph make Merfolk a much better matchup, even though Merfolk is intrinsically, I think, a good matchup. So yeah, if you're wanting to build a Legacy deck, this deck's cost is roughly a modern deck's cost. Roughly. Maybe slightly higher. It depends on the versions of the cards you get. But with Flooded Strand being recently reprinted in Modern Horizons 3 and its price is lower, your biggest expenses, to be honest, is just Prismatic Vista and Force of Will. So if you get those two cards, the rest of this deck is really cheap, and I like that a lot. So I definitely recommend this deck. If you're still watching at this point, make sure you hit the subscribe button if you haven't, and I'll see you next time.